Hey everyone, I'm Ashleigh Banfield. This is Drop Dead Serious, and I'm coming to you early today. Normally I drop episodes in the evening, but today I'm doing an early one. It's April 6th, Monday, day 65 in the Nancy Guthrie investigation. It's an important day for Savannah Guthrie. This was her first day back on the Today Show. I have a ton for you today about this. It may not seem significant to you. It's actually really huge for a lot of reasons. First of all, I'm going to show you a whole bunch of clips that I thought were very significant throughout the 2-hour show that she did today with her colleagues. And then I've got a really special guest who's joining me. Brian Balthazar worked with me at NBC. He was a producer of mine on the shows that I did on MSNBC, and we've remained friends all these years. He's also been not only a producer on the Today Show, I think for over a decade, and he became like that with Kathy Lee Gifford. But he's also been a guest on the Today Show a lot. So he's very familiar with the protocol, the traditional, the standard, the format, the everything, and all the personalities when it comes to the Today Show. So he's going to join me with his thoughts about the program today, the significance of it, how hard it is. It's not just showing up on TV, y'all. It is hard to do one of those shows. You work all the day before, at night, you try to get a good sleep, you get up at about, I don't know, crack of ass, like 3 o'clock in the morning, maybe 2 a.m. if you're a lady, because we got to do the hair and makeup. The boys don't have to do so much. But it is a lot. And then, of course, you throw the pressure of everything that Savannah's been under and the emotional strain that she is still under and the grieving. And then try to put on your happy face and do a show like that. So I want to go over some of the significant parts of the show that I thought really stood out. First and foremost, they opened the show in a standard way. There was nothing different that the Today Show producers did to, change anything up. Like Savannah came in ready to work and do the standard job that she always did. I actually figured they would have her on tape a lot, that they'd help her ease in slowly, back her off, not have to do so much live. Nope. She did absolutely everything that she does normally. There was one interview that Craig Melvin did that I think might have been strategic because it was emotional and it might have been really hard for her. No idea. It could have been Craig anyway on a normal day had the whole Nancy Guthrie tragedy not befallen Savannah. But they opened the show and Savannah was wearing a yellow dress. And there were yellow flowers in the backdrop. And then throughout the show, you notice there are yellow flowers all throughout the studio. I don't think that's an accident. Everybody knows you tie a yellow ribbon around the old oak tree to signify wanting someone in your life, a loved one, to come home. And there have been yellow flowers all out in front of Nancy Guthrie's home throughout this horrible ordeal. And people on the Today Show have been wearing yellow ribbons as well. So yellow is a significant color, clearly. It signifies to everybody, not just Today Show watchers or people who've been watching the Nancy Guthrie story, but ever since Tony Orlando and Dawn sang that song back in the 70s. I remember it well. Tie a yellow ribbon around the old oak tree. It's been 3 long years. Do you still love me? Anyway, so yellow has come to signify that for everybody, well before this story began. And so Savannah was wearing a bright yellow, beautiful dress, and Craig was wearing a yellow tie as well. So they opened the show in a standard way with the regular headlines, news about Iran, about the Artemis shuttle, about President Trump's profanity-laced tweet, everything. And then they came up on the two of them, at which point it was the first acknowledgement that, okay, it is a bit weird, and I'm glad to be back. And Craig acknowledged he was glad to have her back. Here's how it looked.
This is Today with Savannah Guthrie and Craig Melvin from Studio 1A in Rockefeller Plaza.
Pretty shot of the sun coming up. Good morning. Welcome to Today on this Monday morning. We are so glad you started your week with us, and it is good to be home.
Yes, it is good to have you back at home.
Well, here we go. Ready or not.
Yeah.
Let's do the news.
Yes, so good to have you back. All right. There's a lot happening here on a Monday morning. We're going to begin with those fast-moving headlines.
So then they went right to the news, and they did it the way they normally do, jogging back and forth between Craig does a line and Savannah does a headline, etc. And then they came to the first on-set interview. pressure's on, stress is on. There's a former career military man sitting on the set live with Craig and Savannah, and they're going to interview him about the missing airman who was rescued in Iran. This is emotional too, right? Because this airman spent a couple of days wedged into a crevice, I think 7,000 feet up a mountain, trying to hide from the Iranians after the Iranians shot down his and his fellow pilots' fighter craft. And so he was injured, and this was a hell of an ordeal, and it took over 100 military to rescue this missing airman in a, Black Ops operation. And his family would have been in trauma like Savannah. So this is a kind of a difficult interview. So the fact that Savannah did the interview with Craig and the airman on set, I thought was very significant. Take a look and see how she handled it.
Let's take a deeper dive into that dramatic rescue. And we turn now to retired Colonel Steve Warren, an NBC News military analyst, former Pentagon spokesperson. Colonel Warren, good morning. I mean, let's give credit where credit is due. This was an incredibly complicated and courageous effort to retrieve that airman. And we were just talking to really speaks to the best of American values, leaving nobody behind.
So there you go. I mean, Savannah did not break. She did her job as she would have any other day. You wouldn't have noticed a difference. So really, really professional, very strong for her to be able to conduct that very professionally, get to the news of the matter. And, she was involved in it. She agreed to be involved in that interview. So the next thing I noticed, there's an NYPD policeman over their shoulder in the plaza behind them. Not weird. Okay, so typically big crowds are at the Today Show in the plaza. They're in the window behind, and there is usually some sort of security back there. Some viewers might have thought, ooh, look, there's an NYPD cop. Maybe this is unusual. They're nervous about what could happen. There might have been a bit of that. I don't know, but it's also not unusual to have security or NYPD out there in the back. I just thought it was a little strange that he's right there in view, right? And he's the only person in view. There's no crowds. It's just the NYPD cops. So that was in the backdrop. Then they went to March Madness, and Savannah kind of made her first joke and laughed. And it was really sweet because I guess, she had to acknowledge that the UCLA women's basketball team won the championship. And I guess that wasn't Craig's team. So she sort of went, earmuffs, Craig. Here's how it looked.
Switch gears now to the excitement of college basketball. Earmuffs, Craig. UCLA just crushed South Carolina to win the school's very first. It's strong but appropriate.
Then the next moment that was very sweet, and again, everything was very quick, right? They did not dwell. They didn't make it syrupy. They just did it very professionally, acknowledging the elephant in the room that Savannah's back, but moving on and doing the show professionally, doing the news, doing the segments. And they threw to Al Roker for the normal weather segment where they throw across the studio and he looks back at them. And Al made his first comment towards Savannah. It was very sweet. He said, I just like looking over here. So here's how that transpired.
Look who's here this morning, Mr. Roker.
Well, I just like looking over here. So
Good morning, sunshine.
Good to see you, my dear. All right.
So, of course, Savannah says good morning, sunshine to him. Again, a very bright and uplifting moment for her, and I'm sure a joyous moment. Al has been there forever. He's the longest running talent on morning television at this point, and certainly on the Today Show. And so the next moment, they had wrapped up the first segment of Savannah's Today Show return. It was about, 15 or so minutes into the hour they're going to throw to break. And then you'll see that, I guess Craig just wanted to acknowledge to Savannah this, you made it. You made it through your first moment back on television. The first live block is over. We're going to commercial break. We can stop down, take a breath. And he gave her, a high five. I thought it was a little bit awkward. It was kind of a high five. It was a little aggressive, given that, Savannah is, I think, in a bit of a delicate, way. Certainly didn't show that she was in a delicate way, but this is how the high five out to break looked. So now they come back after commercial break. This is how fast the show goes, right? It's already 7:30. The half hour is done. It was just one segment. They go to the locals, they do some segments, some commercials, and then they come back to the National Today Show team in New York. And at this point, Carson Daly has joined the set. Now, Carson and Savannah are very good friends off air. In fact, If you think back to the How to Copy interview with Savannah, she actually mentioned Carson Daly. She mentioned that she had just spent some time over at Carson's with their kids when she actually got the news from her sister Annie that their mom was missing. So it's 7:30. Carson's on the set now. Carson actually acknowledges all the folks out on the plaza. Many of them have signs that they've brought. Welcome home, Savannah. One woman actually had Savannah and her mom on a sign. I'm sure that would have been so hard for Savannah to see that, but also heartwarming.
We are back at 7:30, back with Carson, back with Al, back with that big crowd out on the plaza. A lot of those folks out on the plaza to welcome back our dear friend.
Yay. Some beautiful signs out there.
There's been signs for so long. They're going to be so excited to see
I'm
you.
excited to see them, give them all a hug, and really feeling the love so much. Thank
Welcome
you.
back.
Good to be back.
Great to have you. Guys, we got a lot to get to, starting with a remarkable moment nearly 50.
Savannah then goes into this interview with everybody about the Artemis mission to the moon. And it's the first time like Savannah really laughs, and it's super sweet. Take a look.
Yeah, with all the modern technology we have now, it's going to really contribute to what's going to be happening next. So.
The fact that they can send back images and do interviews.
Yeah.
The Wi-Fi must be incredible.
Yeah, well, I sent Victor some email, but I haven't heard back from him yet. But he did send a group email with some photos, and they're able to. It's great.
That's amazing.
The toilet may not work, but the 5G is working.
That's great.
Then Jenna Bush joins the set. Now there's all 6 of them up there. And Jenna and Savannah are also very good friends, have been for a long time. Savannah's acknowledged that many times in her Instagram and on set, etc. They spend a lot of time off air together as well. Kids around the same age too, I believe. And Jenna has a segment called Morning Boost, and she says something so sweet to her friend. She says, we don't even need a morning boost because we have our sunshine back. And she reaches across and holds her friend Savannah's hand. She reaches across Carson, but, too bad if it's awkward. I'm going to get over there and hold your hand. Here's how it looked.
We're back, and Jenna is here, and we've got a morning boost.
We don't even need a boost because we have our
boost.
sunshine back. But I'm bringing you a boost.
Let's do it.
It's my job.
So that was a really sweet, uplifting, lighthearted moment. Then it got funny again, and Savannah again got into the fun. They did this segment. Boy, I wish I'd known about this, by the way. The segment when I had kids, because I could not stop their tantrums, and I was looking for every magic bullet I could find. Turns out there's this TikTok sensation out there where if your kid is screaming and yelling, you just pretend there's someone named Jessica where they can't see her, and you call for Jessica's help, and the kid instantly stops crying. The tantrums completely end, and it's really hilarious. And so they're throwing to it, and Savannah's laughing. Take a look.
Carson, do you want to try to have a meltdown and see if Jessica works?
Sure.
Let's do it. All right. Well,
Don't tempt me with a good time.
So now they reopen the 8 a.m. hour, so it's kind of a reset. And usually the 8 a.m. hour is a little more lighthearted. And this is where I was thinking there might be something a bit bigger to welcome Savannah back. No way, man. They are sticking to business and doing the show professionally. And so Craig and Savannah welcome everybody back. And again, there's a mention. It's good to be back home on the Today Show. And, Craig says, good to have you back. And they mentioned the We Love You, Savannah signs out in the crowd, which is very sweet. It's the window backdrop now for the 8 a.m. hour, and you're starting to see the people and their signs in the backdrop. You didn't see that in the 7 a.m. hour. Then they do their regular news headlines, and they throw to the interview. I mentioned this off the top of this podcast, that Terry Crews, who is the America's Got Talent, it's hard to say. He joined the Today Show with his wife, Rebecca, to make an announcement. I did not know this. Maybe everybody else did, and I'm the last to know. But Rebecca Crews has Parkinson's and has been living with Parkinson's, very serious Parkinson's, and has undergone a very new cutting-edge treatment. I think it's a non-invasive focused brain ultrasound. And so they sat on the couch, and they did the interview with Craig. This is an emotional interview. This is Terry Crews with his wife, who has been suffering immensely and went through this really, risky procedure to try to get her Parkinson's under control. And this interview went to Craig. It might have anyway, but I just thought, if given the choice, would have Savannah said, this is very emotional. I'm in an emotional state right now. I think maybe I better not do this interview. Who knows why they made the decision? The decision is made. Like I said, could have been in any other day that was normal, Craig would have done the interview. But I just noticed it, that right away, this was a moment that would have been a little tough for Savannah to conduct. Then after the Terry Crews and his wife, Rebecca interview, they have the first moment where all six are on the couch. It goes from the anchor set now over to the couch. All six of them are there. And Savannah makes an acknowledgement about having kind of been out of the game, for a couple of months. They're talking about The Voice. And she says, spoiler alert, I haven't caught up. My family and I haven't caught up on the episodes yet.
My kids and I watch The Voice all the time.
You do, thank you.
Spoiler alert, though, because we're not fully caught up yet.
Yeah,
But it is
well,
the
thank
best
you.
show to watch with your kids.
It is one of the few family-friendly shows. We take
Yeah.
great pride in that over
It's
there.
really fun.
Thank
That's
you.
why you're like season
Thank you.
43.
That's exactly right. That's it. That's right. Keep them coming, Craig. Keep them coming.
Just ahead, guys, we have a Hollywood legend in our studio. Keanu Reeves is here.
Okay, now it is the bottom of the hour, 8:30. This is when they move the whole thing outside every day, and they're in the plaza with all the fans. I figured this was going to be the most emotional time for Savannah because there's everybody, people who have this outpouring of love and support and emotion for Savannah. They've brought their signs, welcome back. There's again that sign with Savannah and her mom, Nancy, on it, which Savannah's going to see when she comes out in the plaza. She probably has already seen it. They did do something different here. They had the other anchors out in the plaza. They welcomed everybody back to the 8:30, bottom of the hour at the Today Show. And then they said, here's Savannah, come on out, SG. I think Al Roker said, come on out, SG. And this is the moment where Savannah actually walks out. Normally she'd be there. You'd open the cameras up at 8:30 and she'd be there. But this was kind of like a grand entrance or exit, so to speak. And Savannah is in her coat and she's in very, very high heels. And Jenna is holding on to her arm. Now, I thought, well, you don't need to hold on to her arm. She's fine. But she was wearing very high heels, so I thought maybe that was why. But it looked like a show of support to hold Savannah as they walked out together to the plaza. This is what it looked like.
We're welcoming back our North Star. Yeah. SG, come on out here. Come on back out.
Good morning. Good morning.
They've been waiting for it. They've been waiting for it.
These signs are so beautiful. You guys have been so beautiful. I've received so many letters, so much kindness to me and my whole family. We feel it. We feel your prayers. So thank you so much.
It's not just today. They've been out here
Every day.
every day.
This is such
with
a nice
signs.
pocket square. I don't want to slobber on it. Okay. It is. I know. I'm sorry.
How little is a million of them? Don't worry about it.
We love you.
Star-studded morning at
Then they come back and Savannah has another really cute chuckle about this segment they're going to do on the 50th anniversary of the Charlie's Angels show. Here's what it looked like.
Superstar.
my
Why did you wanna be
15-year-old self
Cheryl
got very very excited. Deep down on the inside, I started to move around when I saw that. I had a poster of the Charlie.
Oh, bet you did. I was just saying, which one did you want to be?
Cheryl Lai.
Yeah, I wanted to be Jacqueline.
Okay.
Yeah.
I want to be Bosley.
You were Charlie. Yeah. All right, let's get a check of the weather.
And then they threw to break, and then you see Savannah over at the crowd acknowledging the folks who are there and also like taking a selfie as they're going to break. You can just slightly hear Savannah's voice as they head to break.
You ready?
When they come back from break, you'll notice that, again, Craig Melvin takes the interview with Keanu Reeves. Now, that's not going to be an emotional interview, so whatever it was, maybe Savannah just wanted to back off a little and say, Craig, you do the heavier lifting, the live stuff. I don't want to worry about a wild card if a celebrity starts acknowledging this moment, and I struggle with it. Who knows why the decision was made? It might have been made anyway. But I just noticed that Craig did the full Keanu Reeves interview, and then they threw back to the last segment that Savannah did, and that was a segment with Jenna on the couch, and they talked about perimenopause. It was kind of an easy lighter interview, but serious about health and nothing that would sort of strike a chord and make things difficult.
Hey, good morning. The zone of chaos.
Yeah, wow.
Man, preach. Ain't that the truth? Okay, what do you say the new perimenopause makes it sound like the new fashionable thing? What do you mean by that?
So a lot of women are blindsided by this.
Well, also, when does it start? I mean, let's talk about it. The zone of chaos sounds like a roller coaster ride.
Or a great band name.
Yes, exactly.
And that effectively was it. There was no goodbye. Savannah didn't say goodbye. I think they do this on purpose. They kind of throw to the next segment. It goes to Carson Daly. Carson Daly goes to break, and then they open up on the third hour, and that is a whole new cast. And so there was no official goodbye. There was no official thank you so much for helping me through this. None of that. It was just the segment's over to you, Carson. And that was the end of Savannah's appearance on the Today Show. But man, oh man, did she ever do a great job. Talk about grace under pressure. And it could not have been easy. I'm telling you, that whole stress of being live, knowing that the world would be watching. I'm sure that the ratings will go through the roof. There's a lot of promotion that this was going to be Savannah's first day back. And hats off to her. I don't think I could have done it. It's why she is at the top of her game, in the top position in television. And, I think most everybody would join me in saying, congratulations, we're proud of you, Savannah, and we're all rooting for you as you continue on in this, I don't even know what to call it, this netherworld of sadness and confusion, but also forging ahead with your family and your career. I now want to talk to Brian Balthazar, because if anybody has insight into the inner workings of everything that went on to put this show on and what it looked like when it was on, Brian is the guy. Not only has he been a part of the NBC family since I was there back in 1999, but he's also been on both sides of the camera. He was a Today Show producer. He's been a Today Show guest. He was an MSNBC producer. And, partly talent, partly producer, and also tight with a lot of the producing staff and the talent. Here's my conversation with Brian. Brian, first of all, it's so good to see you, because if our audience doesn't know this, Brian and I go back, how many years?
Well, let's not get lost in numbers. But 25 and 26. I don't know, it's been a minute.
27.
It's been a minute, Ashleigh.
27.
Yeah,
Honest to
okay.
God, 1999. Yeah, just FYI. You look good.
Thank you. So do you always. That's good to see you.
I always say it's smoke and mirrors and makeup and lighting and all the rest. But
okay.
But I thought of you right away because just background here. Brian and I worked together on a show on MSNBC for years, and then Brian worked on the Today Show. I mentioned this in the intro already, but that you've done on camera, you've done behind the scenes. You were Kathy Lee's best friend.
Yeah, I launched the fourth hour with her. Yeah.
Yeah, you have just such an incredible grounded knowledge of the culture of NBC, the culture of the Today Show, the machinations, the protocols, all of it. So you're perfect for this. Give me your overall impressions of Savannah's return this morning on the show.
I have to say, I was pretty blown away. I think one of the things that's so compelling about this story is that we're all, each one of us had a mother. Now, how that relationship was for each of us is different, but we all kind of put ourselves in that position. Many of us are just trying to imagine the emotion of doing something like, or going through this in the first place, and then going back to work and having to put on, and in the same way that she described it in her interview with Hoda a little while back, was that to come back and do it from a place of joy, because that's what that show really kind of at its core needs to be. I was really impressed. At her ability to kind of just say, buckle up, let's cover the news. And I was impressed about how they covered it. I thought they did it in a very authentic and sincere way. I like that they kind of didn't put it in the cold open, or the pre-recorded open, that they didn't have her, refer to her own story, which I think they obviously alluded to it. She was wearing a yellow dress. She was wearing a yellow heart, and there were yellow flowers everywhere. But at least initially, it was like, let's hit the ground running. And I can understand why it was important for her to feel some degree of normalcy, to feel like she could have that life back. So I was really impressed with how well she carried herself.
Do you what would the producing meetings have been like? Because I'm thinking these meetings went on for a week, figuring out what balance are we going to strike. How much do you think she was a part of it? How much do you think there were suggestions that she might have pushed back? Like, give me the background of how you think it all came together.
I speculate, I imagine that, first of all, I do know that they've been very considerate and very kind in their approach to her and what her comfort zone and her comfort level is. That I know for a fact. I think the conversations probably were, how do we address this or not address this? You know, how much do we say and how much we don't? And they've always been very cognizant about even what they say about the investigation in kind of chat moments. But I think they probably were very calculated in who, as they always are, who does what interview and with whom. Does they have her do a solo interview? Do they have her do interviews as a group? They want to be mindful of how she's doing and probably check in every break. How are you feeling? You feeling good? You know, that kind of thing. I think she probably also had a lot to say about how much she wanted to refer to it, the situation that she's in. And then how much, I thought was really interesting is she kept it really, really together. And 8:30 is when they go out onto the plaza. And that's the one part of the show that's not really scripted in the same way that the others are. So and that was where she got emotional. I think that was an interesting moment because in those earlier, and we're all imagining what this must be like, because how can any of us know? It's such an anomalous situation, you can't even imagine it. But I think in those earlier segments, when you have a script and you have a guest and you can keep that focus, and you've been on the air for years and you know that, you're still your truly authentic self, but you're also really like laser focused on the story you're covering,
the work,
the guests that you have, and also trying to be hyper aware of everything that's happening around you. I think that's why people don't necessarily know how tiring it can be to be on air sometimes, as you were on air for hours at a time, as is Savannah. So I think that 8:30 moment where then there's this outpouring of people on the plaza, they're holding signs, like that's where you don't have that same, like, here's my guest, here's my story, here's my rules of engagement. Yeah. I think that's where that was like, wow, that's where you really see how strong her resolve is. And then when she showed some emotion, I think that was the appropriate place to do it. So I think they certainly thought about, to summarize your question in a much shorter way, I think they thought about who does the cold open, who does the hello, who interviews each guest, when and what do they say about the situation at hand. And I think they did all those very thoughtfully. And I think the other thing that they probably have had the conversation about is, and what we haven't seen manifest yet, is how do they then handle this if there's a development in that story when she's back?
I'm getting to that. I'm getting to that because this is it's one of my big questions that I have for you, because this is a big issue for NBC to deal with it. So I'm going to get to that in a moment, but I don't want to leave this issue about the assigning the interviews. And I'm going to get to the moment out on the plaza too, because there was a grand exit as well that was quite big, and I want to talk to you about that in a second. But quick note from our sponsor, let's talk about what's really in your makeup. Most of us spend a lot of time worrying about what we eat and what we drink and how we take care of our families, but we cake our faces with makeup that's full of chemicals that we can't even pronounce. Your skin is your body's largest organ, so what you put on is absorbed. And that's why I use Deepens & Co. Here's what I love. Their liquid foundation and face primer don't just cover your skin, they actually nourish it. Most makeup requires constant touch-ups, or it leaves your skin feeling heavy and clogged. Ugh. But this stuff feels incredibly light. It doesn't cake, and it actually lasts throughout the day. Yay! Makeup with mystery chemicals, you do not have to do that anymore. Simplify your routine and actually feel good about what you're putting on your skin. Head to toopsandco.com/Banfield. And guess what? They're offering my listeners 25% off your first order. You just use my code Banfield. Again, that's toopsandco.com/Banfield. And use my code Banfield for 25% off your first order. The link is just down below. Super easy. The two big interviews today were Terry Crews and his wife on the sofa. Craig Melvin did that. And then Keanu Reeves and Craig Melvin did that as well. Mm-hmm. Do you think that would have been normal, or do you think it was specific? Look, these are moments where you're solo, you're by yourself. Terry Crews is an emotional interview with his wife. She's suffering from Parkinson's. Who knows the wild card that is Keanu Reeves? What if he brings up the issue that you're dealing with your mom? What do you think the decision making was there?
to me, I'm not so sure it was so deep with those two interviews, because I'm trying to, if I were executive producing that show, I'd be thinking, what, if any, parallels are there in a guest story or even the plot of a movie? I remember, here's a strange example. I remember when my mom was ill. She had health problems for a while, and I was renting her movies. And I learned very quickly how often certain things come up in movies. I'm like, oh, I can't send her that. So I would imagine they were probably thinking about all the nuances of that guest and that story, and are there any ways that could be somehow, emotionally triggering? And so I think a good producer, would say to their guest, we're going to ask that you don't refer directly to what she's going. I think she was more than capable of handling both of those interviews. But I think if I were a producer, or if I were EP, I would inform the guest, we ask that you don't bring up this matter directly. I think most of them would have the common sense to not do that. And maybe, I think even, let's say, often after we go to break, sometimes there's a moment between a guest and the host of kind of an authentic moment, an unscripted, authentic moment. Hey, I'm thinking of you, that kind of thing. And I think they probably, I would say, let's just, keep that in mind. I think that the other interview that she did do was with Jenna regarding perimenopause. And so there's another example that maybe she could have done that alone. But I think it's appropriate in this case to create a safe space where it's I don't think the average viewer probably didn't overthink who was sitting in those segments, because they weren't necessarily anything that I thought were connected in any way, shape, or form that would make you think, oh, she should have or should not have done that. When I was running hours of news and talk, usually, let's take this scenario way out of the picture. The debate over who led a segment was usually who is the better guest interview. I want to do that hard-hitting interview. That was not the case today. These were fairly light interviews. There were light stories that were being covered. So I don't think necessarily that came into play today. But it is an interesting observation that you make,
Well, I just thought, what if Savannah's alone on the couch with Terry Crews and his wife, Rebecca, I think her name is, and this is emotional and this is hard. They're struggling. They're having their life is in turmoil, and she just all of a sudden is seized with the, empathy of feeling that way. That was the only thing I wondered about that one. With Keanu, I thought, I didn't know how many producers would feel comfortable talking to some big star and telling him, you can't do this.
Right.
Maybe
that's why there's usually a person
to say
outside
that.
of the group. Yeah, there's usually, that big star. And I think Keanu's one of those people who's a class act anyway. We've seen how he is, his authentic self, from riding the subway to just hanging out with, your average Joes on the crew, whatever the
not a prima donna.
Examples are. Exactly. But most of these celebrities don't come alone. So they have a publicist or a manager. So a producer that maybe doesn't have the courage to say it to them would say it to their liaison. So there always are these kind of checks and balances, these procedural things that can help you ease into what may be a difficult ask. But I don't think that would have been the case today.
So who do you think made the decision on wearing a yellow dress and having yellow flowers all throughout the studio?
I think the yellow dress was probably Savannah's choice. I think that's been kind of her and the Today Show family's nod to their empathy and love for her and the situation and raising awareness. So I think that was probably her choice. As far as the flowers, it's an interesting question. I wonder, I think it was probably a very mindful decision. They've been carrying the theme of yellow throughout. So I almost think it would be unusual not to have it today of all days. So I think they probably ran it up the pole in some way. I think there probably have been a lot of conversations between the executive producer and Savannah about her comfort level with certain things. And if I were the executive producer of that show, I would be going through okay, I know these may seem like very minuscule questions I'm going to ask you, but are you okay with yellow flowers? Are you okay with, there's going to be signs on the plaza. Do you want to go out on the plaza? All of these things. I think that those are things that and I'm sure they were very compassionate and empathetic with her about doing this. I'm sure of it, that they really did go through all of the steps. Typically a host or anchor will get a walkthrough, a verbal walkthrough of the rundown of the show that morning. I think they probably did it last night, to so everyone sleeps better knowing that everyone is comfortable with what's going to happen in the next day.
I did notice that one woman had a sign out on the plaza that had Nancy Guthrie's face, next to Savannah. And I almost wondered if that was something that could be in the control of the Today? Could the producers have gone out and said, "Ma'am, this is too much. Could you maybe put your sign away?" That didn't happen. It was front and center.
Yeah.
It was shown multiple times.
I did think of that, and I wondered to myself how I would have handled that if I were an executive producer. One, it's like there's quite a bit of security in every case on the Today Show plaza. So I do think they were probably mindful. My concern is always like that one is a sympathetic sign. I think my biggest concern would be the unpredictability of the plaza, and not that I'm not suggesting something terribly nefarious happening. I'm really saying like, we live in a world of internet detectives, and I was concerned about like the wrong people trying to hold up, what I'm trying to say is like, I would be very aware of like making sure that all the signs were warm and sending the right message. I don't think anyone would send negative messages. I would be really, really mindful of all of like, not overwhelming anyone. You know what I mean? That was really what I'm trying to say. I'm not suggesting anything crazy or underhanded. I'm just saying I would be very mindful.
Do they have the right to tell people that sign goes, you go? Is the plaza really their property where they can say you're a guest on this property and you cannot be here?
I can't speak to whether it's, I think basically at the bare minimum, someone can ask nicely about, if that sign might be upsetting or something like that. They can ask, and if they say no, then a director will say, "Stay away from that corner. Just don't show that shot."
And the cameras don't shoot that way. Yeah.
Yeah, because that happens on every day. Every day you go out on the plaza, you're wondering if someone's going to hold up the wrong sign. It's not exclusive to this. You're like, is someone, going to try and get attention, or on a good day it's someone asking someone to marry them, but also sometimes it's just someone trying to be funny and get attention and go viral for who knows what. So you always are
mean
mindful
or funny.
Yeah. Now, granted, I think to get onto the plaza area, there are barricades, so you can't just walk up in the way you once used to. I think it's more controlled now. So there's that. I think that there are more levels of security to being along that barricade than there used to be. So that's in their favor as well, that they can kind of monitor that messaging.
Thank God for that, because people, they're the worst. And I say that all loving, because there are some really terrible people out there. You got to be aware of them. So the other question I had was in the beginning of the show, you could see through to the plaza, and you can't see people. And the 7 a.m. hour, you don't see the people, but you could see an NYPD officer. And I was trying to remember how normal it is for an NYPD officer to be on the plaza. Is it every day?
I believe so. I don't think that's an anomaly, but I think I don't know if any communication would have been had about that, but I think there's always some level of security. I frequently have seen police cars outside the plaza because I still am in that area often during that time of day. So I don't think that's too unusual.
Yeah. Okay. Now, do you have any knowledge of the mood in the last 2 months in Savannah's absence? How it's been among the staff and on the producing team?
I think there is a genuine love for Savannah in the inside of that team. She is a favorite among the producers for sure. I think there's been a real respect and caution exercised internally to not, and I think also just for the what's the word I'm trying to say? I think also for the integrity of the investigation, they're just trying to be very careful, like in everything they say and do internally. I think they treat this with a very sacred approach, because I think they mention the Today Show family quite a bit. And I'm sure there are probably a lot of people who don't really understand, what do you mean Today Show family? You're not a family. But I will say, and you can speak to this yourself, like when you work with someone and you've spent months overseas with a very small group of people, they do become chosen family. Like you have a relationship, you say things to these people you wouldn't say to your own family. So there is an authenticity, a truth to the level of devotion and care that exists among that group of people. So I think, I think the first answer is absolute horror at what happened, incredulousness. This is an incredibly unusual and shocking story. It's a crazy situation. So I think there's almost kind of an emotional paralysis that comes with something that happens to someone you know and love, but also not everyone on the staff is going to be equally close to her. So I think there's be cautious, be appropriate, be careful. But I think there's a genuine love and affection for her, and obviously a great deal of empathy and sympathy for what she's going through.
Well, and the internet has been a very mean place, for all stories, all people.
Yeah.
It's not just exclusive to the Savannah story, but she certainly has had to struggle through a lot of real haters out there. And I even see some of the folks that you and I know and have worked with piling on and saying, oh, it's a cesspool, and then someone wants the job, and there's a jockeying going on. And they, a lot of people have said it's not the family you think of. I hearken back to the days where, it became pretty apparent that that Matt Lauer and Ann Curry did not get along, and there was a genuine dislike there. So the whole notion that it's always happy, loving family isn't always true. But is there any element of that in this cast?
I mean, I think the gravity of this situation has, if there was any level of that, I think the gravity of this situation has sort of eliminated,
muted
whatever that may have existed. And you're absolutely right. This is still a workplace. There are still people who have career goals and ambitions. But I think in this particular case, I think we're dealing with something so huge that I think everyone kind of has risen up. It's a situation we've never seen before. It is like out of a movie. It really is. It seems like a movie plot. It just seems so unbelievable. And so I think I think people have really risen up to really be there in the right way and be present in the most supportive way possible.
I thought of it as I was watching through the show, because like you said, there's internet detectives who are going to watch every single shred of that show and read into it. And I thought a lot of people on the internet would read into Shinell, who never acknowledged anything, multiple appearances today on the show. And she never said, welcome back. She was the only one of 6 who didn't say, welcome back, we missed you, and had a few opportunities and didn't do it. And I just wondered if that was going to be yet again a blow up online.
I mean, you can never underestimate the online haters' ability to kind of glob onto something, is glob on a word or expression, but kind of to attach themselves to something and try and create something conceivably out of nothing. I will say, I personally am one of those people in awkward situations when I don't know what to say, I freeze up. And that can, for me, be conceived as when I've been that way, I'm like, am I being perceived as uncaring aloof, or aloof? But for me, I'm not a person that's at a loss for words. But when these situations come up, I don't know where to begin. I've lost people that I'm very close to in my life, and so when I even though I've had that happen, when I see someone else going through it, I still don't know what to say. So that's what you're suggesting is a very simple thing to do or say, but like like you said, there's scads of online sleuths, and they're all trying to find something. And we've seen examples where that can be a good thing. Sometimes internet sleuths can have insights that can be really incredible. I don't know if you saw the documentary "Don't F with Cats" or things like that. Like
words to live by. And then Gabby Petito
so
was solved by online people. Online sleuths solved Gabby Petito.
Right, and so there definitely there are scenarios in which online sleuths can be incredibly helpful, and I think we walk that fine line of trying not to dissuade people, because I'm listening to a podcast called Love Trapped, where someone online discovered that someone was faking a pregnancy through what they were wearing because they saw it on Amazon, like all those things. There are these situations where online kind of sleuths can do some digging and find something really of value, but then contrary to that, there are some that are just
there's a love-hate relationship there, right?
Yeah.
Like sometimes they see things first, and those things do bear out. Other times they read into something that isn't there. And I expected that when I saw that. I thought, I think the internet's going to do some chewing on that. Who knows what will happen? Variety also had a report a while ago, before today, before the show this morning, that there's no obvious successor to Savannah. And I had to think through it all. And I thought, I think Nicole Wallace would be a great Today Show host as well. But I guess there really isn't necessarily the next obvious person?
I think that is a conversation when there's always, after every pairing on the Today Show, there's always been an article about that. Who's the successor and is there one? And this is not the first time we've heard that conversation. There was a time when no one thought that you could replace Matt Lauer. That's just the truth. Yeah. They used to think there was no one who could replace them. And frankly, that was
one Katie.
Of the most right.
I mean,
right.
Katie.
But they thought, who's, at the time there was this perception, it has to be a man and a woman. You know what I mean? And then sure enough, Matt was out and two women took that desk, and it was a very smooth transition, And so I'm of the belief that, well, it's tricky. The internal politics of any network are always tricky. That's just especially on the ascension of a talent. So who knows? But I just believe, you can get lost in those hypotheticals, and then until the day comes where you have to make decisions and choices. And so I think the network was great, and just like saying, give her the time that she needs. Hoda stepped in, and now we see where this goes. But I think today was a remarkable example, and I'm sure you watched the 3-part interview they did. I'm consistently impressed with the level of faith and resolve and strength coming from this person. I did not know Savannah well. I do not know Savannah well, other than occasional meeting, crossing paths and meeting up at certain situations. But I did not know the level of the depth to her strength and conviction.
I couldn't do it. I'll tell you. I have been just gobsmacked by how erudite she is in a time of stress and pain. I mean, at a time when most of us are umming and ahhing our way through any communications with somebody, let alone a national audience. I've been shocked at just how good she's been on her feet, despite the struggle that she's in. And I'll veer away from the Today Show for a second into the Easter message, because I watched her Easter message, and yet again I thought, holy shit, this girl is, and she's been taking it on the chin. There's a lot of people who are saying, oh, come on, everybody. There's so many people who've suffered, tragedy. Why are you special? But I look at it differently only because I see that it is different. She's under a microscope. She thinks it's her fault. The potential for this whole thing could have been because of her fame. I do see it differently. I do see that the pressures on her have been tenfold from another person who might have lost a loved one, who would do this with the support of just family and friends, and not this, glaring Klieg light. But her address was just really fascinating. By the way, anybody who watches it, please don't stop halfway.
Right.
Because, Savannah questions Jesus and if he's ever suffered like she has. If you stop there, you won't get her. You won't see, as my producer Lindsay says so eloquently, she lands the plane. You got to watch her land the plane and hear the message.
She says she has, quote, questioned whether Jesus really ever experienced this particular wound that I feel, this grievous and uniquely cruel injury of not knowing, of uncertainty and confusion and answers withheld in those darkest moments. And one of the things I think that is so remarkable and so effective in how she's managing this is that she is being completely authentically herself and saying things that how could you I think we all the times, and whether or not you're spiritual, if you're someone who believes in God, I think the irony of it is that when you need them when you need a God the most is also the time when you feel the most abandoned sometimes by your spirituality, by your faith. And so that's where you either draw in strength or you feel frustrated. My own mother was like, wait, this is when she was sick. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. She went to church all the time. She felt betrayed by her, her religion. And so the fact that she's saying these things that I think make her that much more relatable. I think it's one thing to be a pillar of strength, which she has been, but you also need the vulnerability. You need to acknowledge the fact that I'm strong, I'm doing my best here, but also this isn't fair, basically. You know what I mean? I think that is part of what I find so remarkably relatable, and yes, it's a situation unlike any other. She's in a public profile, and she has millions of viewers, but she also has this very, very human human connection that I think that really endears her to people watching and listening.
Brian, also, just because you've been an executive producer, a lot of people think that if you're on TV, someone's written it for you. You know, if you've given a message, somebody was there to guide you. Somebody was there to tell you. You just showed up and read it. That's not the case with a lot of television these days. That is not the case with cable at all.
Right.
And it's not the case with someone like Savannah. So just like from your knowledge and your background, explain to the viewers how much of everything that Savannah is saying and doing right now is all her and no one else's voice.
Completely her. In fact, I don't think anyone in that building would dare suggest she even tweak a letter of it, a word of it, unless they were extremely close to her and saying, "Is this what you're trying to like?" I can't even imagine. She wrote the whole thing. First of all, she wouldn't need anyone to give her a tip, because there's literally no one who could tell her, "No, this isn't it." Even under normal circumstances, a show open. These are shows that the talent come under tremendous scrutiny under normal circumstances about what they say. I think that's eased slightly, but there was a time when I was there during Katie and Matt, and if Katie said something that was even slightly incorrect, they would come at her in the newspaper. You know what I mean? So anchors, as you know, the same thing. You've experienced this as well, delivering the headlines. Boy, if there's a slip of the tongue, which all of us do. Every single one of us. And if you don't think you do it, listen to yourself, like record yourself and play it back. But things like this, things of this magnitude, she wrote it all herself. And then it gets put into a system and she reads it, but she's reading her own writing.
Yeah. So. In the news headlines, it's a little different. There's writers who throw the news headlines because they're happening overnight and they're being jammed out real fast. Sometimes they're being jammed out literally right before. Yeah,
that's true. They could be instant, but even then, sometimes you'll be like, "Oh, I know when I talk, this will come out more, conversationally. This doesn't sound like something I'd say." So you can still say that fact and and the system I'm referring to is a computer system that in real time will adjust the teleprompter based on in seconds what you've adjusted. Now, granted, the things she's saying in these situations, she's written the night before, or whenever she's written them, or so you have the ability to put it in your own voice. But these are things that are completely her.
Yeah, I just want people to know that anchors are not just spokesmodels. They generally, used to be a time when they were. Honest to God,
yeah, there were
when
far
they
more
read a
people writing for
teleprompter.
them. Yeah. I mean, as
nowadays
it's
different.
And certainly we always refer back to your yellow legal pad, Ashleigh. Like when you had no prompter, it was all your words because you had written them. And I know that you had written them. I mean, you should have been a doctor because I can't read a word of it. But
Brian, do you know what I did over the weekend? I went through 20 years of stuff that was in the attic. And I found all my legal pads from Afghanistan. There was a whole clump of them, all the reporters' notebooks from Afghanistan. And I tried to think, what am I going to do with it? And I ultimately threw them away.
Did you? I was going to say, because I think it's hard when you go through these things. You're like, I've been going through that lately where I'm probably going to move. And I'm like, do I want to move this? And it's like, oh, one less box. But it's hard. It's hard to just, it's really hard to part with those things. Sometimes you have to go back a couple times.
I kept photos.
Yeah.
I kept the photos. I leafed through them, and I started thinking, "God, I don't even remember this. But my penmanship was much better." And then I did remember a few of them, and I remember a few of the interviews. And this is Sheikh so and so Abdullah or whatever. And I thought, I can't believe how much shit I went through every day to put the show in the air. Anyway, I digress. Speaking of news, I do want to ask you, especially as an EP, how is the Today Show? Do you think how is the Today Show going to handle news about Nancy Guthrie?
Well, that's the thing that I think is going to be probably the tricky part. I think I would imagine the understanding was, and if I were an executive producer, I would say, first of all, she'll find out first, probably, in all likelihood, or not. The distance between someone finding out and her knowing will be very close. But I think they will give her the option of saying, do you want to bow out today? Do you want to take today? I don't think they're certainly not going to be like, and now here she is with whatever. The minute there's a development of great magnitude, she will be on the first plane, home. So I think that is something they're going to figure out as they go together. I think that now that we're in a situation, unfortunately, where there haven't been many new developments of great magnitude that we know of. So I think when that day comes, they'll have that conversation. How do you, Savannah, want to handle it? And give her the ability to weigh in. But I think the first and obvious thing will probably be to say she's not joining us today because she's,
Back
and I
in
think
Tucson.
that there'll be a great amount of compassion and understanding when that day comes. If and when that day comes, that they give her the grace to deal with that in whatever way she sees fit.
In her way. And it's important to know that news sometimes does break between 7 and 9 a.m. But like you said, when you are a victim's family member, if there's massive news, you're usually told first. And so the news division won't even know about it before Savannah knows about it. And in that way, they'll be able to make their decisions accordingly. It's not as though, news is going to come across the teletype and suddenly it's on the anchor desk and they have to deal with it with her sitting right beside. That's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
So, Brian, I mentioned it earlier. I want to dig into it a little bit more. The last part of the Today Show, they go out to the plaza. You already touched on it. I want to go in a little bit more in depth here. They opened from commercial break on some of the anchors. Savannah was not there. Jenna was not there. And then Al called for SG, come on out. That's not normal. Having Savannah and Jenna walk out together, sort of, I think Jenna holding her for support, but also she had very high heels, right? So I think Savannah might have needed the help because of the heels, but that was a moment. And I wondered what you thought about that. Would that have been something the producers would have asked for? Would that have been something that Savannah would have said, I'm fine with it? Like, how would that have all come about?
They would certainly have run that by her. I don't think she initiated that. I think that someone said, you're returning to see your fan family, the Plaza family, I guess. And so I think there was probably a general awareness that there would be a very warm reception. I was actually surprised by it too, but I was also
very surprised.
Yeah, and I'm certain that they asked her first. I'm certain they asked her first. Now, what I don't know is, did they ask her at first to do alone? And they said, I'd love Jenna to come out with me. Like, having Jenna with her, I thought was appropriate. And came from a place of warmth. I think if it were her by herself, that might have hit differently, for lack of a better way of putting it. But I think it was really a way of showing people at home how much the people out there were reacting to her return. And so, because I will say this, when you're on the plaza on any day and one of the anchors comes out, there is an eruption of screams. It just happens. It just because they've been out there since 6 a.m, those people. So when they
waiting in the cold and rain,
if not earlier, sometimes it's earlier. So when they do get there, and they're all trying to get a shot, they're all trying to get a glimpse or a photograph of the Today Show talent. And so when that does happen, you hear it. You know it. You're inside and you hear, oh, somebody just went outside. You just know it. Or there's a camera on those people. So I think that, that was definitely a decision made internally. And it would have been run by her. And then someone said, why don't we have Jenna come out with her? It's her best friend, one of her best friends. And so that was ultimately what happened, and I think it did capture it. I mean, you heard it right at the moment they came out, but it was definitely a moment that you don't typically see, for sure.
And also, this was the moment that she did finally break down and let a little tear out. Yeah,
I mean, it's the moment where there's no script, there's no teleprompter in front of you. There's no one really, with the exception of Jenna, right beside you to kind of. It's literally a moment where it's authentically you just walking out there being greeted by a wave of love and support. So I'm not surprised. I didn't expect. I was always thinking about what would 7 a.m. look like. I didn't expect that moment to come at 8:30, and it was an appropriate place for her to be emotional because she had her friends there with her, but also this reflection of just how much people were supporting her, for sure.
And thank God for that. And so, what are your thoughts about sort of the days and the weeks and the months ahead? Just business as usual, almost as though nothing ever happened. Any reference, any milestones noted? Like how do you suppose they'll want to treat this relationship going forward, how she'll want to treat her. Remember how she said, I want to give it a try? I don't know if I'll be able to do it, but I certainly want to try. How are they going to handle that going forward, do you think?
I think probably one of the hardest days was today, right? I think now we'll probably see that references to her being back will kind of trickle off, a little bit, and try and return to some normalcy. I think probably also her own, as she said herself, like being here and part of this family that she feels so tight with. Part of that is feeling like she's regained some of her life back, and she even said herself like that when joy will be her protest. I'm paraphrasing it, but like her coming back, and she wanted to feel authentic. Like when she's happy on the show, it will be real, and that will be her protest. And I think there's no right or wrong answer. There's no way to know how long it is before you should return to whatever your life is, whatever you want your life to be in the face of something as tragic as this or as scary as this. So I think probably it will return to more of a business as usual situation day to day. And I think that probably I can't imagine she wants to be reminded of it on air all the time. I think she probably wants to be able to, escape into the news a little bit, escape into a feature story and not feel like she's got this kind of shadow around her. And certainly it will never be off her mind. Every day it will be on her mind until she has some degree of knowledge or closure as she seeks. But I think that it has to, in order for this to work for her, and I think for the viewer, they kind of have to like ease into a bit more of a business as usual situation. And then they will, at the pace that she feels good about it.
Yeah, and hopefully the viewers, certainly the haters, will give her some grace, knowing that, sure, she's a victim of crime, and there's lots of victims of crime out there. And is she special? No, not in that sense. But is she special in another sense? Yes, because she reports this stuff, and she's living it under the Klieg lights of it. So it is a vastly different experience for her than it would be for someone else. But I do hope that. I hope that the entirety of NBC gives her that support and grace and love, and that there aren't those who snipe and hope for her to fail. And I know it in the business, people can be nasty, but generally speaking, I've had a pretty good experience with a lot of folks. There's the occasional ones who aren't so nice, but generally speaking, as a volume, most people are rooting for you.
Yeah, and I think if anything, if there's a change that we may see that's not obvious to us initially, is that someday there will be another story involving another family that involves someone missing. And I think the lens in which they cover those stories may be treated with a little bit of different care or a different lens, to how there was a time in the 2000s. I mean, you and I were in Salt Lake City for a long time covering Elizabeth Smart's disappearance, right? And we never thought, honestly, there was a time we were one of the last satellite trucks there. You'll remember, Ashleigh. We were
5 weeks.
We went from there being 40 trucks to 2, and then 1. And I think we all thought, oh my gosh, they're never going to find. It never crossed our mind that we would months later see that Elizabeth Smart had returned, right? But I think that that was also an era where the people were all fighting for the story, right? And there were people ask questions that now I think would curl people's hair. I'm not saying you. I just mean in general, like everyone wants to get an exclusive. I think now we're in a bit of a different era of the kind of questions that we ask people, and I think in a good way sometimes, not always, but in a good way. In this case, I think
I'll tell you. Yeah. You probably booked this interview, actually, now that I think back to it, but I remember having an interview with Ed and Lois and had to ask the question because that's what everybody was reporting. The headlines were all over the place that, that Ed's got this past and it's probably him. And, I had to ask those questions, and I remember how painful it was just to ask it.
It's hard. And what people don't understand also is that there are people in your ear saying, ask the question. It's not just you saying, oh, I want to. It's not fun for you to ask that question, or anyone for that matter. There are some journalists out there that love to get that.
Dig in there and get nasty. But you have to ask, you can't. You cannot avoid the elephant in the room. As journalists, you've got to do the hard stuff. You've got to report the hard stuff. You've got to ask the hard questions, and you do it with as much, delicacy and grace as you can. But generally speaking, there's very little of that you can offer because it is just such a painful topic.
Yeah.
In any case, listen, I can't think of anybody else who would have a better perspective on just all the stuff in the background that would be going on and would see the bigger whole picture than you. Plus, it's just really good to talk to you again after all these years.
You too, always. Let's do it again.
I mean,
sometime,
talk to you officially.
Yes.
We talk on text all the
it's
time,
true.
but but to be on camera with you is just really fun. Thanks, Brian Balthazar.
Thank you so much. Good to see you.
So that is where we stand, y'all, on Monday, April 6th, day 65 of the Guthrie case. By the way, if I look super tired, it's because I'm doing this in the morning. I'm not a morning person at all. So it is a good thing I don't do morning television. I would never last, that's for sure. But stay tuned this week to my episodes because I'm going to be giving you some updates on important cases that we haven't seen a lot of lately because the Guthrie case seemed to be so consuming, but I'm going to have lots for you. And again, I'm so appreciative that you're here, whether you're watching or listening. Thank you so much. Don't forget to subscribe and join our membership if you want to see some of the exclusive content that I release to our membership every so often. And we have these really fun Q&As. It's kind of funny and silly, and we do them every couple of weeks, and we hope you can join. Thanks again, everybody. And remember, the truth isn't just serious, it's drop dead serious.